Alright, I have absolutely never been interested in smartphone gimbals until trying out this one. This is the Hohem iSteady M7, and I've been testing it out for the past month and a half or so, maybe even 2 at this point, and it is the first smartphone gimbal I have ever used that doesn't feel like a complete gimmick. It genuinely feels like something I can use a little bit more seriously and actually have a benefit from using it, both for my personal stuff, but also for client work. And with how good phones are now for shooting video, I think that having something like this as an accessory for mobile filmmaking might actually be a better option for some creators out there than having a bigger and more complicated camera setup. Now, this was sent to me to test and to share my thoughts, but beyond that, the company that makes it has absolutely nothing to do with this video. But I know some people are still gonna be skeptical, so I just wanna say, I could have made a video about this thing 3 days after getting it, talking about how it is the best thing ever and everyone should go out and get one, but that is not how I do things. And I also genuinely don't care about selling you this thing. So I decided to hold off on making this video and give myself some time to see what this thing is all about and if I actually like it before I talk about it. But still, treat this as more of a showcase and not a review because I still haven't really spent as much time as I would like with it to be able to give my long-term thoughts on it. So I'm gonna get the price out of the way first because I know that's going to be a big deciding factor for some people, and it's usually just under $300, but I have seen it go on sale a few times, so you might be able to get it for a little bit less. But I don't really want to get in the weeds with all of the specs and stuff that you can go and read about on the product page, because what I care about much more is what the experience has been like using this thing. That said, there are 3 specific things about it that are from the product page that I do want to quickly mention because I really like them, and they're actually the main reasons why this is the first smartphone gimbal I've cared about, and they're the things that to me make it more useful than some of the other smartphone gimbals out there. So first up is the Payload, and it can carry up to 500 grams, which means I can easily use accessories on here like my Freewell ND filter or my Freewell anamorphic lens, and this is going to handle all of that just fine. And it's not just going to handle it, but whether or not I'm using accessories, the higher payload means that I don't have to worry about any of the motors working extra hard to keep things stable while I've got the gimbal in weird positions, or if the balance is slightly off because I got accessories on it. Now, because of the bigger payload and the stronger motors and stuff, this gimbal is going to be a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier than some of the other smartphone ones I've seen out there, but that's not really something that I personally care about. Like, if I'm using a gimbal, whether it's for my camera or for my phone, I know that I'm going to be using another piece of gear, and it doesn't really matter if it can fit in my pocket. But the M7 is still pretty light at around 650 grams, but the build quality is very solid, and I honestly expected it to feel much cheaper and more like a toy because that's what some of the other smartphone gimbals I've had the chance to mess around with in the past have felt like, but this thing feels good. Like, it feels solid. So the payload and the build quality are really nice, but they're not my favorite things about it. My favorite thing is actually the little box on top, which is the AI tracker. So nowadays, almost every gimbal that comes out has some form of AI tracking, and the brands that make them won't shut up about how great it is. But the problem is, most of them can only track faces, which has always kind of felt like a gimmick to me. Now, I know that some DJI gimbals let you add stuff like the Raven Eye system to be able to track other objects, but you need to buy and set that up separately. The M7, however, includes its own tracking module right in the box, and it does all of the usual face tracking stuff. So I can use a gesture to start tracking myself, and it's gonna move around as I move. I can use a gesture to have it stop tracking me, or I can use another gesture to reframe the composition that it's using to track me. But that's all pretty standard. What makes this tracker way more useful in my opinion is the option to follow objects that aren't people in whatever camera app you want to use without having to go out and buying anything extra. You just open up the feed, double tap whatever you want to track, or you can also draw a box around it and press the button on the side of the screen, and it's going to do its best to lock onto it. And I should mention that it does work best with people. It's not perfect with objects, and there are occasionally issues and quirks here and there, but I've still been genuinely impressed by how well it handles tracking non-human subjects. Another feature I really like is the detachable magnetic magnetic remote on the back, which has the screen, the joystick, and a couple of buttons on it. And the reason I like it is because it lets me control all of the settings on the gimbal and to check what the tracker is focusing on without having to like physically hold the gimbal or standing right next to it. And when my phone is connected to the gimbal over Bluetooth, I can use this same remote to start and stop recording. It is important to mention that the feed on the remote is showing you what the tracker is seeing and not what your phone camera is capturing. And there is going to be a slight difference because the tracker itself is a little bit offset compared to your phone camera. So when I want to see what my phone camera is actually recording, I've been using the gimbal CP5 Lite, which was sent to me a while back. And this is just a small wireless screen that works on both iOS and Android, and it connects to my phone and mirrors the display. It's not the most exciting thing in the world. There really aren't a ton of features on it. I can flip the image, I can adjust the brightness, I can start and stop recording, and that's about it. But it has been really useful when I can't look directly at my phone screen, and it is something that's been very helpful recently when I want to film stuff with my iPhone, but I can't have it right next to me. But again, I wanted to actually go out and try this gimbal in some different situations and push it a little bit more to see what it's good at and when it starts having issues. So I used it to film behind the scenes for some friends on a recent project. I also set up a few of my own test shoots, and I got a few things that I want to talk about. So first off, like I mentioned, this thing is best at tracking people. The face and person tracking feels really solid and it stays locked on even if the person isn't looking straight at the camera. And that's great because you can move around your subject and focus on the actual movement while the tracker keeps the framing the way that you want it. And it's also very useful if you're filming someone on uneven ground because you can let the gimbal keep the shot lined up while you focus on trying not to eat shit. Now, when it comes to the object tracking, that's going to be like a more simple tracking, and there are a few things that you want to keep in mind to get the best results out of it. For example, if your objects take up more of the frame, so they're bigger or they're just closer to the tracker, they're going to be easier to follow. Also, good lighting helps a lot, and it seems to prefer things that are bright or colorful, but darker objects can confuse it a little bit. Sometimes that means it's going to start tracking as it should, but then it'll drop the subject a few times and try to catch up to it. Other times, the tracking box that shows up isn't going to be perfectly around your subject, and you might need a couple of tries to get it to stick to the right thing. But none of that stuff is honestly anything I run into way too often, and most of the time it still does a good job tracking darker objects. So the short version is it works best when there's good contrast between the subject and the background, and a lot of the time that's going to mean big, bright, colorful objects that just stand out. But I also wanted to push it a little bit more, so I tried it out with a friend on a mountain bike, and this is by far when it had the most issues. When there was a fast-moving subject plus me moving with the gimbal, the tracker had a really hard time, and the box on screen would lag behind, and sometimes it would stick onto something in the background, or it would just drop the tracking completely. And even with the tracking speed and the motor strength set to high, it still had trouble. Also, weirdly, sometimes after losing the subject, the tracking speed would reset itself back to medium on its own, even though a couple of seconds ago I set it to high. And I'm not sure if this is how it's supposed to work and I'm just not getting something or if it's a bug, but I really hope that this is something that can be fixed with like a firmware update because it is a little bit annoying. And it's weird that it even gives you the option to change the tracking speed manually when it's just going to reset itself automatically anyways. Now, I did get it to track my friend a few times, but it wasn't consistent enough for me to be able to fully trust it in fast-moving situations. And realistically, I get that most people buying a smartphone gimbal probably won't use it for that kind of thing, but again, I wanted to see how far I could push it. That said, if I ever do use it in those situations, I'd probably just treat it like a regular gimbal and frame things manually because honestly, even without the tracking feature, it is still a great gimbal at its core. And that's exactly why at the start, I said that I think this setup might be great for creators who already use their phones to shoot content, whether it's personal or professionally for clients, because it is light, it is versatile, and it has helpful things like the tracking module, the magnetic remote, and even an extendable middle column that gives you a little bit of extra range out of it. Also, the box with the tracker module has a little built-in RGB light, which I don't really see myself using that much, but it's still cool that it's even an option. Now, personally, one of the ways I do see myself using this is for behind the scenes clips when I'm shooting solo, because I don't always have someone available to come and help me with grabbing BTS clips, but with this thing, I can just set it on a tripod somewhere out of the way, and I can use the gestures to start and stop tracking while I set up gear or I shoot stuff, and I can just keep the remote in my pocket to make sure that it's all working. But aside from that, I've just been having a lot of fun experimenting with it, and I'm sure that I'll keep finding more ways to use it in different workflows and projects and situations down the line. Now, this gimbal is already pretty cool on its own, but I also heard some rumors that Hohem might be releasing a bigger gimbal that's meant for mirrorless cameras that's going to have a payload of, I think, around 2.5 kilograms, which is also going to have some of the cool stuff from this one, like the tracking module and the magnetic remote. And if that's true, that's definitely something that I'd be really interested to try out, because if it works as well as this one, it sounds like it's going to be kind of crazy. But until then, I'm going to keep messing around with this one because I genuinely like it and I think it's pretty fun. And if everything goes well, and as long as it doesn't break on me or something, you're probably going to see more stuff shot with it coming to the channel down the line. So I think that's going to be it for this one. But if you got any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one. See ya.